Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Shutapa Sinha, Associate Professor in the Department of Islamic History and Culture, University of Kolkata, Calcutta. Today's paper is Indian Polity, and under which we are going to learn about the module entitled Administrative Reforms of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. We will start with a very brief introduction of the Tughlaq dynasty. That is the first objective of learning of today. Then we will go into Muhammad bin Tughlaq and his administrative reforms. We would like to know about what are the nuances of his administrative reforms, like exodus of capital from Delhi to Devgiri and its pros and cons, token currency and changing nobility by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, views of the historians, and the summary of the entire module. We are actually now in a position when Delhi Sultanate has been consolidated to a large extent, and this is the third dynasty of the polity, Delhi Sultanate polity, that is the Tughlaq dynasty, which was actually came after a brief period of the Khaljis who ruled only for a period of 26 years. The founder of this dynasty was Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, and in the map we can see that unlike the earlier period of the Balbans or the Mamluks and the Khaljis, we can now see that almost all parts of India now came under the control of the Tughlaqs. Here we can see that the pink area is shown as the extension of the Tughlaq Empire, and we can have a portrait of Muhammad bin Tughlaq as well. We can have a quick look to the coins of Fakhruddin Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and actually he was a prolific issuer. He was a man of a great vision. So say few examples of his coins are here, and the famous coin or the famous coin type that was issued by Muhammad bin Tughlaq was his token currency. In our module later on we will going to discuss about this in detail, and how it had an impact on its reign that we will going to discuss. So to start with, after the Khaljis, especially after Alauddin Khalji, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq and his son, they did not accept his policy of non-accession of distant states. So both the father and son, they were very ambitious, especially Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He was not prepared to leave a scrap of territory in India. Thus, during their rule, the direct control of Delhi was extended to different parts of South India like Warangal, Telangana, Mabar, that is Coromandel coast, Madurai, that is Tamil Nadu, and Dwara-Samudra, that is Karnataka, to the southern tip of India. However, his cousin, Muhammad bin Tughlaq's cousin, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, he tried to revive the tradition of a state based on benevolence and policy of conciliation. Finally, we can start particularly with the period of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, who was also named as Ulugh Khan or maybe Jauna Khan, who succeeded his father in 1325 under the title of Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq. According to his contemporary historians, he was a man of a heterogeneous character and of contradictory policies. He was a learned man, and he refused to accept the dictates of the nobles and especially the ulema in all political matters of the state. Muhammad Tughlaq was not a religious bigot. Rather, he showed his greater respect for the Hindus than was done by any of his predecessors. He was very keen to upgrade the administrative system of the state, and he tried to bring uniformity in its functioning, and so he issued many orders or mansurs. But there was a problem. The problem was that as Muhammad bin Tughlaq was very ambitious, he tried to bring under his control almost the entire part of South India, and already northern India was under his control. So he tried to implement a kind of centralized administration all over the country. But in doing so, he of course taken several measures, but there were lacunas which we are going to discuss in the following time. However, Barani, the great historian, he says that these reforms may broadly be divided into two groups. One is administrative and political reforms, and the other is economic and agrarian reforms. And this module is going to focus on the administrative reforms basically, but along with that we will try to look upon or make a glance, a very brief overview of the other reforms little bit, because without that the administrative reforms cannot be discussed in completeness. So, so far as the administrative reforms is concerned, first we are going to discuss about the major step, the most controversial step that was taken by Muhammad bin Tughlaq was the transfer of capital from Delhi to Devgiri. He was allegedly ordered a mass transfer of the people from Delhi to the new capital at Devgiri, which is in present-day Maharashtra, and renamed by Muhammad bin Tughlaq as Daulatabad. Careful analysis of different sources showed that Barani grossly exaggerated when he alleges that the steps led to ruination of Delhi, which was compared with the leading cities of the Islamic world like Cairo and Baghdad. This decision was not a very hasty one, and it was the result of a considerable thought and prior preparation and plan. The decision to make Devgiri a second capital was taken in 1327 on his way to Karnataka. Actually we say that the transfer of capital from Delhi to Devgiri, but ultimately the evidence shown us that it was not that Muhammad bin Tughlaq wanted to shift his entire capital to Devgiri. Rather, he wanted to establish a second capital at Devgiri in addition to Delhi as his primary capital. But now we will see that what are the motives behind the transfer of capital was there. In the early years, the direct rule of Delhi had been extended to cover almost the entire south, and the Sultan himself had spent a number of years in the south as a prince. So he was very familiar with Devgiri, which had a very pleasant climate surrounded by the hills. Another positive point was that it was a central to all parts of the entire empire. That means it was almost equidistant from Delhi in northern part, from Lucknowti or Bengal in eastern part, and also from the southern part and western part of the country. So he wanted to have a second capital in the south so that he could control it more easily. Now what we can see, that we can have an idea that what are the reasons behind the shifting of this capital. Ibn Battuta is of the view that the people of Delhi wrote abusive letters to Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and in order to teach them a lesson by depriving them of the capital, he took this measure of exodus, and this view also is supported by Isami. The Sultan wanted to create another major administrative center so that Muslim population get expanded in Deccan. Gardner Brown, he ascribed the reason as the constant danger of repeated Mongols' attack. There was a revolt of a great magnitude in the south, and Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq, he desired to strengthen his position there. And some historian has stated that poets like Amir Khusro, he has created a kind of fascination or great fascination for Devgiri in the mind of Sultan regarding the beauty of Devgiri. But the fact remains, as a prince, Muhammad bin Tughlaq spent a long time and he had an experience, he himself had an experience of the pleasant climatic conditions of Devgiri. So the decision taken by Muhammad bin Tughlaq to shift his capital to Devgiri, or rather to establish his new capital at Devgiri, was completely of his own. Muhammad Tughlaq took up all possible measures for providing comfort to the people in the course of their journey from Delhi to Devgiri or Daulatabad. He constructed a road from Delhi to Devgiri and planted shady trees all along the road. Peoples were given free food and drinking water after every 3 kilometers of journey. They were provided with the means of support. He set up stations with the Sufis and their khankas within this road. All were compensated for the loss that they had incurred in leaving their assets in Delhi. All were given free residence and food at Daulatabad, and instead of all these comforts provided by the Sultan to make their journey comfortable from Delhi to Devgiri, it was a tormenting experience for the people of Delhi, as it was a journey of 40 days and it was taken place in the hot months of the year. So many people were died while making this journey from Delhi to Devgiri. Though there was no mass exodus of the population of Delhi was ordered by the Sultan, but there was a good deal of pressure on the people to migrate, and as a result those travelling to Daulatabad, they were divided into caravans for purpose of convenience. The journey was long and it was already, that we have mentioned, undertaken during the hot months. Full preparation has also been made for welcoming the people who are coming to Daulatabad. Sultan's mother was also traveled to Daulatabad, accompanied by many nobles, leading persons of the city, along with her royal household, including the slaves, servants, and all other treasures. And we can also say that Muhammad bin Tughlaq was very considerate regarding and very well planned regarding this shifting of capital. That's why he made a kind of setup. He already made a setup in Devgiri. It was renamed as Daulatabad, as the second capital of the Sultan. It had been divided into wards, separate wards, or the mahallas, with separate quarters for the military troops, the nobles, the civil servants, the judges, and the learned men, and the merchants and the artisans. All were settled in different wards or mahallas. Mosques, markets, public baths, etc. were built in each mahalla. The Sultan purchased the houses and dwellings of those at Delhi who had migrated. Liberal grants were provided or given to the people both at the time of their departure from Delhi and also at the time of arrival at Daulatabad, where free boarding and lodging were provided also. Nevertheless, in spite of all these arrangements, most of the migrants were not happy with this shifting, and for them Daulatabad was an alien land full of infidels. In the meantime, Delhi was not deserted, as we have found in the descriptions that Delhi was completely deserted. There was no cats and dogs even in the streets of Delhi. Probably it was not that true. Coins were struck from Delhi during this time, and we have found 2 Sanskrit inscriptions fixed at a bauli, that is a brick well in Delhi, and which is actually the habitation or residence of a Hindu noble person, which imply that Delhi was also habited during this time. In fact, apart from that, we came to know that Sultan also invited some learned person or man of learning, ulama or the Sufis from other parts of the country to come and settle in Delhi during the same time. And coin was also struck from Daulatabad as a second capital. That also testifies the fact that Delhi was not totally deserted when Muhammad bin Tughlaq tried to shift the majority of the population of Delhi to Devgiri. But unfortunately, during this time, just after this, we can say just after this migration, a major rebellion took place in Mabar, and Sultan himself realized that his ambitious project is going to be a great failure. So he ultimately, in between 1335 and 37, he ultimately gave permission to the people to go back or return back to Delhi, as he realized that the scheme is not going to be success. Therefore, the exodus to Daulatabad proved to be a very costly failure and brought misery to many people. Though historians are of opinion that its effects were felt largely by the upper class and not by the common people of Delhi, but several reasons have been given for the failure of this scheme by the historians. Number one, we can say that the Sultan should have shifted only his court and the courtiers first, then the rest would have followed themselves. The Sultan probably should not have asked the elite people of Delhi first to go to Daulatabad en masse, because common people were not prepared. The theory of shielding the empire from repeated Mongol invasion do not seem appropriate, because there is a theory that some historians said Muhammad bin Tughlaq wanted to shift his capital because Delhi was getting repeated Mongol attack, but it was not the reason. However, because it was very difficult from Daulatabad to control or to resist the invasions of the Mongols, which was taking place in the northwestern territorial region of Indian subcontinent. Thus, the Sultan was was absolutely wrong in the choice of the place and took wrong methods to build the second capital at Daulatabad. The only positive impact or the effect that we can say of this capital shifting or the exodus of to Devgiri was that after this a large number of Sufis and ulema, they did not move to Delhi, they remained settled in Daulatabad, and thereby after a certain period of time it became, or rather the Deccan became a seat of learning of it became famous as a seat of learning and a seat of the Sufis as well. There are several famous Sufis who have their own center at Deccan in this part. The military expedition, there were some other incidents that took place during the same time, which may also considered as the military part of administrative reforms of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. We are just touching upon these points, like the military expedition to Khurasan in Central Asia and Karachil at the Kulu Kangra region of Himachal Pradesh. That those two were also proved as a failure due to mismanagement in army and lack of planning. Another important measure that was taken by Muhammad bin Tughlaq was the tax reform. There were 4 legal taxes already in vogue, like namely Kharaj, Zakat, Jizya, Khamsa. But Muhammad bin Tughlaq, he levied many other taxes in addition to them. His reforms in tax policy, particularly over the Doab region, was proved to be a perfect failure, and due to which the usual revenue earning could not be gathered from this Doab region. In 1329-30, the Sultan introduced a token currency which remained in circulation until 1331-32 AD. This is one of the major innovation rather of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and in a way we can say call him as a innovator or the father of the token currency of present day currency system. But the scheme was designed to fill the gap in the gold and silver reserves emerged as a result of two frontier expeditions that took consequently. Both copper and brass coins were issued by the Sultan in lieu of or in exchange of gold and silver coins. He made these token coins legal tenders and kept their value at par with gold and silver coins. But this currency was kept in the market only for 3 to 4 years because people started to forge coins, these brass and copper coins, in large number, and therefore the total system of this forged currency collapsed. The idea was that the Sultan has promised or will promise to pay the equivalent sum of amount in exchange of a brass coin or a copper coin, which actually should be the equal in terms of gold and silver. But he didn't have the kind of control on the minting system of this particular currency. If there was a centralized mint which solely can make or solely can produce or struck this type of coin, then there should have a kind of control. Since it wasn't there, and it was a very common type with inscriptions on both sides, most of the people, most of the moneyers rather, they were basically Hindus. They started to strike such type of the coins in forgery, of course the false coin, imitation coin, almost in every household. So Barani said that most of the houses in Delhi became a mint there because of this reason. So naturally the inflow of those for a forged currency became bigger than the reserve. So ultimately it collapsed, and Sultan paid back equivalent amount to the people who have got those forged coins in exchange. So it was a huge loss for the treasury as well as for the administration. According to Professor Irfan Habib, the people were responsible for the failure of the scheme because they failed to discriminate between genuine coins and imitated false coins. But most of the historians have put the blame on the Sultan himself. And according to them, it was a blunder on the part of the Sultan. He did not take proper action to check the imitation coin or to check the imitation coin to come into circulations. Now we can have a look on the changes in the ruling class and the social nobility, which had a great impact on the administrative system of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. His selection of the nobility was neither based on race nor on religion. He warmly welcomed those who had been already settled in India for long and had served previous rulers. He also admitted to the service the persons from the artisan or other class or caste, like gardeners, barbers, cooks, weavers, wine distillers, musicians, and others. They were either converts or they were the Hindus. And Barani mentioned that these people were given high status, offices, and territories to govern. And it was not the case that they were not experienced or not competent. They got this high post because of their competency and experience and skill. We can put an example of Nazba, who was a singer and given charge of Badaun, Gujarat and Multan. They were quite competent, he was quite competent to rise into this high post and on the basis of his merits. But the problem with these people were that they were not the soldiers and that's why they could not deal with the rebellions. Therefore, the nobility of Muhammad bin Tughlaq could not be an entirely efficient machinery on which the Sultan could lean in the times of difficulty. On the other hand, generally the low caste appointees and many Turkish and Hindustani nobles were always remain loyal to the Sultan, while the Mongol and the Afghan Sada Amirs, they behaved in a different way. Rather, Sultan had a kind of danger from that side of the noble class. We can also mention about another step that was taken by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, which was quite important for his administration, that is induction of the religious group in administration. He wanted to induct the Sufis and the ulema. They should, to be included in the administration, and he even entered into matrimonial alliance with some of them. But the Sufis actually, they did not they did not welcome this practice or this step taken by the Sultan, and wanted to keep them aloof from the administrative affairs of the state. And Muhammad bin Tughlaq became very angry with their attitude, and in fact he gave drastic punishment and executed some of them due to this reason. Barani says that he put the theologians, that the ulema, sheikhs, shayyads and Sufis and the Qalandars even, who are the wandering saints, to put to death because of this reason. What was the kind of impact of these policies and measures taken by Sultan? In retaliation and for his association with the Jogis and the Qazis issued a fatwa making it legal for anyone to rebel against the Sultan, as because the Sultan wanted to include or induct the religious people into administrative affairs. In order to counter this propaganda, Muhammad bin Tughlaq decided to seek a formal investiture from the Caliph of Baghdad to make his rule legal in front of this orthodox section of the society. His representative, that means the representative of the Caliphs of Baghdad, came to Delhi in 1339, and there was a lavish reception to welcome him. And Muhammad bin Tughlaq issued coins in the name, inscribing the name of Abbasid Caliph in honor of that incident, and after that he received a formal rescript, that is Mansur, from the Caliph, which made his rule legal in the eyes of the Qazis and other orthodox section of the administration. Now we may have a look of the views of the contemporary historians. Like Isami, he was an avowed enemy of the Sultan. Ibn Battuta, he was continuously amazed at his actions and activities. And Ziauddin Barani, although basked in the sunshine of Muhammad bin Tughlaq's patronage, but he considered Firoz Shah Tughlaq as his ideal monarch. Neither Barani nor Ibn Battuta took pains to examine different aspects of Sultan's personality in the correct perspective, we must say. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was the only ruler who had received a comprehensive literary, religious and philosophic education as well as military training. He was also accused of being a rationalist, that is, one who was not prepared to accept religious beliefs as only a matter of faith. He tried any administrative and economic reforms. He could go to any extent of administrative and economic reforms that would ultimately benefit his subject. And his reforms were quite ahead of his time, but due to some hasty decision and impatience, and maybe lack of planning, he was not successful in all these attempts. So, in sum, to summarize the whole thing, the above discussion, we may say that Muhammad bin Tughlaq failed in successfully implementing most of his schemes, rather most of his administrative schemes, but his agrarian policy was quite successful and made agricultural growth. In favor of Sultan, it can be also said that his measures were quite way ahead of his time. His officials and subjects failed to understand the worth of his schemes. However, the Sultan of the responsibility of the Sultan for the failure of his scheme cannot be ruled out. In spite of his many limitations, we must say that Muhammad bin Tughlaq bequeathed a large empire with a functioning administration to his successor. It can be said that politely that Muhammad bin Tughlaq had a vision, had an imagination, but he has lack of practical wisdom. He lacked patience, desired quick success, and had a suspicious nature. His main problem emerged from the fact that he expanded a huge empire which had become too large, where he tried to impose a uniform and highly centralized administration. Some of his experience and reforms also had a long drawn effect even during the days of the Mughals and ultimately in the medieval Indian history. So after this discussion that we already had on Muhammad bin Tughlaq's administrative reform, you can also have a look to the website for further references. If you want to have more information on other kind of reforms and the detail of those policies that have been taken by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, you can also look at the bibliography, the glossaries, which will put you into the which will give you some other informations on this related subject. The bibliography is quite detailed for your further study, and we should mention here some of the name of some of the books like historians Satish Chandra, his books on medieval India, reference by Irfan Habib on medieval India, Iqtidar Hussain Siddiqui, K. Nizami. All these references are very useful for to learn the entire Sultanate polity, Delhi Sultanate polity, and particularly this on administrative reform of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Thank you so much.